when it comes to Anatomy of a Fall, likely it's going to be one of this year's top best mystery movies. And I think it has the kind of performances where, when it comes to the lead actress in the film, while it's been released a bit early in the accolade season, it's definitely going to resurge as the nominations start coming out. So to summarize the film, it's a rather small cast, and the main people who matter would be Samuel, who's dead, and Sandra, who's accused of killing him. And just to give a little background, these two have been married for quite some time. They've just moved in the past 2 years to Samuel's hometown because Samuel's been going for a bit. He's a professor who wants to write more, but he is yet to be able to really launch his writing career. He's the reason why their son Daniel is now partially blind, because he didn't pick him up and Daniel got into a motorcycle accident. Not because he was on one, but a motorcycle hit him. And in Samuel's therapist's words, because Sandra put so much pressure and blamed Samuel so much, it seemingly was one of the many factors of his depression. But around 6 months ago, Samuel decided he was going to pull himself away from taking his medication, also maybe take away from, going to therapy. And depending on who you ask, this might have led to a suicide attempt. And that's something we have to note, because the only defense Sandra has during all this is that she did not kill her husband. He killed himself. And Daniel is sometimes a pawn in this game about what he knew about the day of the murder and whether or not his father may have had any type of signs, signals, and warnings of potentially wanting to hurt himself, even though all the evidence shows that if Samuel was going to do anything, it would be divorce Sandra, leave her, and perhaps take Daniel with him. So, to start off with the notable highlights, it would definitely be Sandra, because there's versatility there. The actress is able to be that doting mother, the angry wife, portrayed as a whore during the prosecution's cross-examen. She's able to be the victim in some ways because of the way that her and her husband's relationship was. And I just feel like we get a full three-dimensional idea of who she is. And yes, in some ways, is Sandra kind of that stereotypical semi-cold German type? Yeah. But I feel like the way the actress plays up both Sandra's innocence, how cold she can be, maybe even calculating, yet can also give you the sense of aggression, it really helps keep this, I want to say, 2 hours and 30-minute movie probably more engaging than a lot of the stuff that comes out that are superhero films, or even stuff by directors who are considered some of the best to ever hold a camera or else do directing. No shade. The other notable highlight would be the case itself. And that's because the case isn't clear cut. We get a little bit more information, different perspectives, in other stuff throughout the whole case, whether it's the fact that Sandra had an affair, that she's bisexual, whether it is the testimonies of Samuel's therapist and other people he's interacted with, and then we put in a prosecutor who's a highlight within itself in how he comes after everybody, including Sandra. I swear to you, there has never been a better way to spend 2.5 hours watching a movie, and I can't even think of anything to compare this to that has even matched this type of interesting excitement. Like, let me tell you, I was probably, and this is very much TMI, definitely holding my bladder for like the last half hour, 45 minutes, just because I didn't want to miss the damn thing. I wanted to wait to see if maybe there was an end credit scene. I wanted to see what was the definitive answer for whether or not Sandra killed her husband, was she going to get acquitted. And I'd rather test to see if I would end up like Rue on Euphoria when she had some type of kidney infection rather than miss a minute of this movie. Which leads to the last highlight. Even though the prosecutor definitely deserves praise, but I feel like I'll be repeating myself, especially in terms of how great the case was if I just talked about him for a minute. So, Daniel. Child actors, to me, Often in films like this, and even in TV shows, child actors can feel like an accessory. Proof that two people had sex at least once and maybe liked each other. But because the way Sandra is, in terms of maybe trying to keep it together for her son, or maybe being a bit cold in general as a person, unless she's really fired up, that means Daniel has to take on all the emotional weight of losing Samuel. And it's through that you get a sense of what Samuel meant to somebody. For even when Samuel's shown as alive, we don't really see Sandra and Samuel have these lovey-dovey, cute moments as husband and wife. But you do get a sense that Daniel and his father had some type of closeness. They had a relationship. And he's the one that really makes it clear that even though Samuel is not a large amount of screen time in this movie, he's someone that mattered. He's someone who lived. He's someone who had an influence, a positive influence at that, on somebody. And even though he messed up in terms of the whole not picking up his son in time to prevent a freak accident, Daniel still very much loved his father. So to have to deal with the idea that his father has not only been murdered, but his mother, who's now his caretaker, is the one that killed him, that's a lot for somebody who... How old was this child? I want to say that Daniel was only like 11 or maybe he's 12 years old, and he's processing all this, and then he has to testify during the murder trial, knowing that if he says the wrong thing, his mother goes to jail, his dad is dead, so now he has to likely get uprooted from this new home he's only been in for 2 years, and now either live with his father's family. His mother seems to be estranged from everybody in her family, so that's not really an option. He's partially blind, so that's an issue in terms of now he has to be adjusted to a new location, and it's just a lot. And I'm getting kind of tired and exacerbated just trying to break down everything. So imagine the life that Daniel lived and that he is processing, and that is what the actor is trying to give you while you watch this film. Which leads to the overall, which is, to me, if you're someone who likes murder mysteries with notable personalities, a constant stream of evidence, and endings that leave some room for questions, this might be a film that you like. But if you need a conclusive ending that's undeniable, this film's gonna probably piss you off in some ways. And the reason for that is, well, let's give you some ending spoilers. The way this film ends is, to make a long story short, Sandra gets acquitted. Now, why does she get acquitted? It's because Sandra mentions that she believes Samuel made a suicide attempt 6 months ago, right? That suicide attempt did not lead to them going to the hospital. A doctor wasn't reported to the therapist, anybody. It was just kept in the family. However, Daniel has a dog named Snoop, and Snoop had this weird incident about 6 months ago. It was assumed that perhaps Snoop ate some of Samuel's vomit when he tried to overdose, and that led to Snoop nearly dying. And because, Samuel's the main one taking care of Daniel, he's the one who took his son to the veterinarian to get his dog checked out. And because he was saying a lot of ominous, foreshadowing things that made it sound like he may kill himself, Daniel speaks this during his second testimony, which is the last part of the case, or rather the trial, and it seems that was enough to get Sandra acquitted. However, it should be noted that the film never really solves the case. It doesn't say without a doubt that Samuel killed himself. Maybe he tripped and he died by accident. All it says is that Sandra isn't guilty, and it's pretty much all based off of the idea that he killed himself thanks to being frustrated with his life. And by frustrated with his life, I think we have to note, in terms of going in all to these spoilers, Sandra is somebody who has borrowed from her own life, and even Samuel's writings when she had wanted to. This includes making almost an entire book off of one thing she thought was really great about Samuel's idea for a book that he never really developed, which could have caused some animosity because it became a hit for her, Meanwhile, he's still a professor, which is a job that pays the bills, but he doesn't necessarily love, while his wife is just gaining book after book after book, translations, and I wouldn't say he's becoming this mega rich author, but definitely is gaining a bit of notoriety. And speaking of the notoriety, one of the things that was kind of countering the whole idea that Samuel killed himself is that Sandra's books, which are all personal, included a book where her character was talking about killing her husband, which the prosecutor pushes out there. And on top of that, the day before Samuel died, Sandra and Samuel had a fight. One in which she was the one who was physically abusive. She smacked him, hit him a bit. And even though Samuel definitely had some violent tendencies, he didn't strike her. He would usually strike a wall, even to the point of breaking a finger. So, unfortunately, even the idea that maybe it was an accidental death because Sandra and Samuel were fighting and she accidentally killed him, it's not brought up. It's pretty much either Sandra murdered him because of this, that, and the third, because she's a bad person, because she's dreamed about it, so it's really premeditated, or else it's a case of Samuel because he sees all that his wife is doing, he feels so guilty about what happened with his son, he hates his life, and the trajectory is on, he killed himself. And unfortunately, when it comes to Samuel, you just don't get an answer of what really happened. You just know that Sandra doesn't have to pay the price for it. Now, as for whether or not they can do a prequel or sequel, this is a 2.5 hour movie. Okay, there's really not much left to really cover, unless they want to really dive into the romantic side of Samuel and Sandra's relationship. But really, I can't imagine that happening in terms of like a prequel. And then as for a sequel, yes. Can Sandra do like O.J. Simpson did with If I Did It, Confessions of the Killer type book? Absolutely. But do you really want to see a movie produced that does that? Especially after having such a good first one, I don't think that it can really match the energy in a sequel by doing that. Do you?